excited to have this discussion with you all today. The last few years have definitely taught us a lot about connection, and we've had a lot of conversations about it today. How many of you can, just by raising your hands, during the last 2 years missed a concert, missed vacation, family gatherings, all of those things, right? Well, in my work leading the United co-brand business, we have realized that a lot of people have started flying to do things as we've come back and everybody's getting into their new normals and their new habits. And so there's an important part that travel plays in connection and bringing people together. And so as we talk about friendship and connection and happiness and health, I also want to show you a brief video of how the travel card that you choose can actually help you, whether it's United or any other card, like your everyday spending can help you plan those trips so that your dollars go further. If you could please play the clip.
We are a different type of traveler. We seek adventure and 2 times the miles on United purchases. We hunger for new flavors and 2 times the miles on dining and hotel stays. We carry a sense of adventure and a free checked bag. We are the explorers. Join us.
So the Explorer card gives you lots of benefits that makes your everyday travel experience or your daily travel experience a little bit better, but all travel cards offer you that benefit. There's 6 different cards in the United portfolio, but whoever you choose to travel with, whether airline or hotel, you should take a look and see what is the right choice for you. I'm excited to welcome our panel up where we're going to talk even more about happiness and travel and friendship and how it all comes together. So please come join me.
I'm losing my mind just a little.
Please welcome to the stage Michael Tennant, Tina Wells, and Dr. Laurie Santos.
So we have an amazing panel for you all today, from science to heart to like tactical tools with thinking about like work-life balance and blend. So I'll ask each of you to tell us a little bit about yourselves and the work that you do. I'll start with Tina.
Oh, great. Hot seat. Hi. I'm Tina Wells. I'm an author. I'm an entrepreneur. I started my first company when I was 16. And I currently sit in the CPG world, making private brands for companies like Target.
Michael.
Okay, hey, I'm Michael Tennant. I'm the founder and CEO of Curiosity Lab. We make empathy easy and accessible to learn and teach through products like our hit game, Actually Curious, my book that's coming out in the fall called The Power of Empathy, and through content and learning and development experiences that we bring to corporate and to schools around the country.
And I'm Laurie Santos. I'm a professor of psychology at Yale University and host of the Happiness Lab podcast. I'm really interested in the science of well-being and all the quick and easy things we can do to feel better.
Welcome. So, Laurie, you're a psychologist and the host of the Happiness Lab. Can you explain the science behind friendship and health?
Yeah, I mean, I think the quickest way to explain it is to remember that we're social primates, right? You know, we've got this big meat brain that's built for soaking up the kinds of things that we were built for as primates. And that's not like scrolling on a phone or like, being on Zoom calls. That's interacting in real life with other people. There's lots of evidence to suggest that we get positive emotion from talking to other people, even strangers on a train. If you just start to talk to somebody, you'll start to feel better. And there's lots and lots of evidence that when we don't do that, when we start to experience loneliness, when we start to be on screens too often, there's real psychological costs to that. Not just psychological costs, health costs. The cost of loneliness is thought to be about smoking 15 cigarettes a day. So these things can be really bad, not just for our psychological health, but our physical health too.
Everyone has talked about Zoom fatigue in recent years and the miss of like human connection, trying to get people to actually come back out in person. And I've recently read a report that said there's 30% of Gen Z and millennials are suffering from loneliness and depression since the pandemic began. Can you talk a little bit about loneliness and the connection to health and advice that you might offer?
Yeah, I mean, I think, when we're not getting the social connection we need, it has a psychological cost that often turns into, this feeling that we describe as loneliness. It's worth noting that there are different parts of loneliness. We can be lonely for as what we may think of as like an intimate partner or a best friend, like that ride or die kind of person that a lot of, students today don't have. We can also be lonely for kind of activity partners, just somebody to like do something with in the afternoon. And we can also just be lonely for community, right? Sometimes the bar at night is the only like third place out there where you can like meet people. All those are forms of loneliness, and I think what we know is that loneliness is on the rise, but loneliness is also something that's really stigmatized. It can be hard to admit. When people find out I'm a happiness professor and I study this stuff, people will pull me aside at an event like this, like, it's kind of hard to admit, but like, I'm really lonely. Since I became a mom, it's been really tricky, or since I moved from my job, like, I just don't have those. But the key, what the data suggests, is like we're all going through it. And so if we can find better ways to connect, that's going to be something that's going to help us psychologically and in terms of our health, like I think really writ large in the population.
Now that we have a little bit more context on the science side of things, you brought up a couple of ways of thinking through connection, whether it's an intimate connection, relational connection, or collective connection, like all of us being together today. Michael and Tina, what are some thoughts that you have around like daily doses that can help boost some sense of connectivity and friendship with others?
Well, in my new book, The Elevation Approach, I talk about 12 principles of instant elevation, and one of my favorites is to build your tribe, right? And to really have your group of what I like to call friend tours, and figuring out if you have your personal board of directors, the people who are really integral to creating a happy and healthy life for you. And so I think it's the most important thing you can do is to really identify who those people are, and I guide you through different types of people that we need in our life. And I think it's not like we talk about the best friend, right? I have this concept around your 5 people that are really your go-to, but you also need associates, and you need friend tours and advisors and other people that really help round out your tribe, that really makes you feel balanced and living a life in harmony.
Michael, do you want to add into that?
Yeah, and just to build on that, I can really connect to a time where I just didn't know myself enough to understand the shifts that I had experienced at life stages and how that affected my ability to make meaningful friendships, to audit the friendships that existed currently and whether or not they were nourishing to me or just a part of almost a dead persona within me that I didn't even know had moved on. So I think that in addition to bringing intentionality to thinking of your friend circle almost from the inside out, is bringing some real intentionality to assessing who you are today, how you feel, how different environments and relationships react to you today versus how they might have in the past.
Awesome. And so in addition to that like self-reflection, your game, actually Curious, helps people have conversations that help them kind of assess and reflect and learn about one another in more meaningful ways. What advice do you have for people to like step into those shoes of others and create connections that are meaningful?
Yeah, when we originally created Actually Curious in the summer of 2018, leading into the midterm elections that year, our goal was to give the world a tool that allowed them to start light and level up as they built more trust and confidence in communicating. What I didn't realize is I didn't know how to play that game when I created it. We'd have these questions come up and I'd kind of like almost black out and play the game. Yeah. I didn't realize that I wasn't a resource to confront the difficult emotions that were showing up. The people who I created the game alongside, the mostly female and multicultural college-aged team that contributed to the game, they were a lot more comfortable leaning into those difficult conversations. So the key learning that I had is even though we were focused outward, how do we build trust for others? I didn't even know that there was a lot of work to be done internally to show up more grounded and more intentional in those conversations.
Laurie and Michael, can you talk about the importance of trust as a foundation in genuine friendships?
Yeah, I mean, I think trust is really essential. As loneliness has gone up, there's also lots of data, particularly in the US, that trust, as you might guess, from watching the news, is also going down, right? But I think the key is that we need to remember that we can build that sort of thing up, But the key to doing that is exactly what Michael does so nicely and Actually Curious. The key is being vulnerable. And the problem is that that can be hard, right? Not hard for somebody else to be vulnerable with you. In fact, when they are, it often feels really nice that people are sharing with you and so on. The hard thing is for us ourselves to be very vulnerable. And I think this is in part because we have a misprediction about vulnerability. We think when we're vulnerable with people, they won't like it. Like they'll think we're weird, right? If you look at some of the questions in Michael's games, they can be like a little sharey. You might think maybe a little oversharing. We think, no one's going to want to hear that. But if you look at the research, what you find is that the mind works in just the opposite ways. There's an effect that's known as the beautiful mess effect. We think if we're like messy with people and vulnerable, they won't like us. But in fact, people do like you. People feel kind of special that you've shared with them. If you have a friend or an acquaintance at work that you didn't know who really opened up to you about something or asked for some advice, you often quickly feel closer to that person. And so I think part of the problem about trust is that we have to realize that we need to let other people be vulnerable to us, but we also need to be vulnerable to other people.
Yeah, and I think just to piggyback on that, oftentimes the emotion that's on the other side of being vulnerable for many people who aren't comfortable with this level of mess is shame. How many people have shared something maybe when the vulnerability, usually the aid to vulnerability is a little alcohol. You share something that you didn't expect that you're going to share, and the next morning as you're reflecting on it, you feel shame, and you kind of take a step backwards in terms of how vulnerable you want to be. Being able to not only feel that emotion of shame, but to sit with it, prosecute whether it's real or not, maybe even have the confidence and vulnerability to go to that person and say, hey, I shared this thing. It landed this way for me. How did it land for you? It opens up the ability to actually heal through that difficult emotion. And it actually opens that ability for the other person as well.
Can you share a little bit more about the power of that healing? Like when you find commonality and that you share experiences or traits with somebody else, and how that creates the bond of connection, but also can then help you cope and recover from trauma or tragedy in the past.
Yeah. Well, I think, from a scientific perspective, one of the ways that we often process emotions is with other people, right? We process emotions by talking through them, having a narrative, and that can often be helped by having somebody reflect your story back to you, reflect what you've learned through things. We also just regulate our emotions with other people, right? Sometimes when I'm feeling anxious, I want to talk to a good friend, and they can kind of talk me down, right? And so through this process of connection, we often can allow ourselves to get through those tricky negative emotions. And I think what's important is what I'm saying here isn't something like a kind of toxic positivity approach, right? Like just ignore those bad emotions and talk to a friend. It's talk to a friend so that you can use those negative emotions for what they're for, right? Your shame is there to teach you something. Your anxiety is there to teach you something. Your fear might be there to teach you something. But to have a friend help you regulate it, that can be the point where you allow yourself to learn from that emotion and to get what you really needed to get out of it in the first place.
And Michael, your book, you also talk a little bit about self-regulating. Can you share some insights around like breath control and things like that that can help you go from a state of fear to a state of calm?
Let's say in my book, we have a model called the 5 phases of empathy. The very first phase is called the language of feelings, where we teach people about the core emotions that Laurie was just talking about: joy, fear, anger, shame, and sadness. And we teach people that each of those emotions play a positive role in keeping you safe, keeping you energized, keeping you healed. So the ability to know those emotions and to know that they're okay, and to create the container to feel them and not run away, to feel them and to not judge them with a negative light, it actually creates the ability for you to experience that emotion again with more ease. So when we are doing that work to heal, doing that work to experience emotions and not run away from them, and then bringing that into a conversation, being vulnerable with someone, experiencing that emotion, being grounded and showing, hey, it's okay for me to be angry right now. As a Black man, an emotion that I model often is constructive anger, because I want to show the world that anger is okay, and it's okay for me too. So the more that we can create those situations and show people a visual of experiencing emotions and it not being damaging, is the more that they can enter that situation and bring a similar level of groundedness.
That's great. Speaking about finding balance, Tina, I know we talk a lot about work-life balance or work-life harmony, I think is the word that you like to coin. Why do you feel like it's this elusive pursuit that we've been on for so long as a society?
Yeah, I think we have all realized, especially after the last few years, that balance, the idea of balance is very antiquated, because that really implies you keep adding, right? If you have more work, you need more life, and you keep doing this. Where harmony is saying, I want every piece of my life to work together for me, right? Harmony requires that you sit with yourself and really figure out what's a priority for you, and then you figure out how to have those things. And the way I like to describe it is it's kind of like cooking your favorite meal. You know what those ingredients are, and you know when you put in an ingredient that doesn't work, right? And I think that harmony in our lives works the same way. So it might mean that you're pushing to get a new project launch and you're working, but you feel really great. And it might mean that you're taking some time off solely to be with your family and you feel no guilt around that. Or it could mean that you are taking a conference call on your way to pick the kids up from school, and that feels good as well. And so it's really about figuring out what that looks like for yourself, but understanding that we're not gonna ever achieve balance. It's just an unachievable thing. Harmony is something we can have and experience every single day.
That's great. Given how important it is to find that harmony and balance, what are some important boundaries that you recommend that people set in order to accomplish that?
Oh gosh, this is really good. So there are 4 phases in the elevation approach: preparation, inspiration, recreation, and transformation. And what I personally experienced was burnout from constantly being in preparation, inspiration. So you come up with a big idea, you get really inspired to go talk to a lot of people, and you're doing this. Where recreation was the hardest for me. I think it's still the hardest part, which is where you have to take a step back and actually do something fun. And I'm not talking about working out, I'm talking about going on a walk just to look at things. And after that, you kind of either reconsider your ideas or say, okay, I have the energy to push through. And then you get to transformation, where you have kind of completed whatever that cycle looks like for you. And so for me, I talk about 12 principles of instant elevation, but I love Get Curious. It's one of my favorites because I think so often the big ideas or the pieces we're seeking really come just from general curiosity about people, life, a new book, a new idea, something that's just a spark. I've already talked about the importance of building your tribe. And then I would say finally, this idea of letting go what no longer serves you. I think so often we hold on to this idea of a dream and don't give ourselves permission to change that idea of the dream or a vision or how we want to live our life. And so I think, again, it's a process that requires you sit with yourself and say, do I want something different than I wanted before? Do I need to incorporate different types of people into my life, right? Do I feel relationships are stale? Am I interested about something? How can I bring newness into my life? Those are all questions you ask yourself, but you have to kind of stop going so that you can take a pause to ask those questions.
Can I ask, I saw you both nodding your heads as she was talking about boundaries. Do you want to share from a science perspective or like how you discuss boundaries with others, Michael?
Yeah, I mean, scientifically, I think, you're really onto something important, right? Which is that, we often like push ourselves and have this mindset of hustle culture to the point that we don't actually even notice when things are not serving us anymore. We don't even actually notice, oh, I haven't had any recreation in my life. And so I think just this idea of taking the time to be mindful, taking the time to notice, and taking the courage to notice when things aren't working out, right? Because often if you get a free moment and you notice, you're like, this does not feel like harmony, this feels like a mess, and I need to take a break, but then that can feel scary. Or this thing that I've been pushing towards does no longer serve me, and what do I do? And so this idea of kind of being okay with negative emotions, even if those negative emotions are overwhelm, disappointment, sadness about, grief about the fact that yourself is changing, all of those things are really important to have the space to notice and the kind of courage to notice and realize it's not bad, you haven't failed, this is the kind of process that you need to do to kind of get to that point of harmony.
And I think the challenging thing with work-life, there are many challenging things with work-life balance, but one foundational challenging thing is that so many of us derive our confidence from the validation of work. We derive our safety from the paycheck that work gives us. So there is a direct conflict when something's not feeling right with work and we're forced to make an assessment of what that is and what to do with it. In 2019, just before the pandemic, I lost 2 of my older brothers within 3 months of one another. And after the second bereavement leave, I was fired. And at that moment, I had this sort of emotional rock bottom where I chose to no longer cling to external validation. But in order to spring intrinsic validation, I had to put in a lot of regiment practice in order to find the safety within myself to look at situations like not having a job and being unemployed for the first time in 20 years, or all the various ways that made it difficult to check in with the true things that brought me joy, like writing, like connecting with friends. So what happened was an organic healing process that is reflected in my book, The Power of Empathy. And what I think is so powerful of it is we all will one day experience loss in our lives. And we'll all have to navigate our way through it. And so it became this, speak about empathy, meet people where they're at, it became this really common place that I could use my experience as an anecdote to show a moment where we would all need to rebuild from. And how then this practice could be one way, maybe give some tools that may help when that time comes.
When you speak about tools, can you also share how do you think about boundaries in the realm of friendships? I was recently reading someplace that sometimes it becomes difficult with friends because some friends are territorial. Why are you going to brunch with that person and not with me? Or you're my best friend. You can't have more than one best friend. Can you talk about boundaries and friendships and how to navigate that space so that it brings joy and doesn't bring stress?
Well, there's a principle in the elevation approach that really says, don't make withdrawals where you haven't made deposits. And we actually have an exercise in the book where you keep a register for a month, because I think, and I talk about what is a real deposit, what is a real withdrawal, so you can understand, if you ever are about to go to brunch, right, and you have this feeling like, here we go again, you have to ask yourself, why do I feel that way with this person? Do I feel like I am always listening to a crisis and and that person's not listening back? And often, as we keep saying, we don't take time to ask those questions, but it's a helpful exercise, and I suggest you do it even monthly, or as you start to really say, am I overextended? Am I giving more than I'm receiving? All of us lead very busy lives. I'm the oldest of 6 children. So when you're the oldest, you're kind of constantly placed in a position with your parents are different. So boundaries, what you're talking about, has become so important for me in my life, and understanding how to carve out the space I need for work-life harmony. But it often starts with going through that ledger and saying, okay, where am I making too many deposits? Also asking yourself, are you making too many withdrawals? Are you that person that other people might be avoiding? And to really have a moment to say, why is that happening? And what other tools do I need to see so that I'm not the person that's causing the drain on a friendship or within a group of friends?
What would you say might be a great way, in addition to the ledger, to just help with the self-awareness factor of, am I making deposits or withdrawals? Like, is it doing the ledger, or just being intentional and asking for feedback from people as well?
I think you can ask for feedback. I think you also can read the situation and see how conversations are going. Are you talking more than the other? Like, just really kind of finding a way, even casually, to observe engagements with other people and how they feel.
And I think another thing to remember is, I think in your ledger of withdrawals and deposits, I think you don't want to just do that in the friend domain, because sometimes our friendships can start to feel like they're draining us, not because those friendships are draining us, but because the other things are draining us, right? We've brought so much of our best selves and our time to work that when it comes to the friend day, it's like, oh, I'm too exhausted. But then that's not like, well, then I'll just decrease my friend time. You need to take a good look at what are the other factors that are causing you to feel overwhelmed, and then maybe get that back more in alignment. I see this a lot with my students, my college students, where they'll say things like, I don't have time for friends because I'm doing this extracurricular, this work, and this, and it's like, wait a minute, I think we might need to shift the priorities here, because the friendships are what are going to build you up. That's what increases the pie rather than depletes it. So I think that ledger is so important within friendships, but also kind of more broadly of like, where is your energy going? And maybe, you need more energy for friendships.
Yeah, and in The Power of Empathy, the first thing we introduce in everything we teach is helping individuals to connect better to their somatic experience. So that is the science that we actually feel our emotions in our bodies before we can make an intellectual connection to what it is that we're feeling. What's so important about that is most of us don't have trust yet or a lexicon to assess, like, hey, I feel this tension in my body, in my chest perhaps. Let me trust that and see where that goes. And you may see that in some relationships that you have that maybe have served you for a time, but are no longer serving you. So as a foundational tool, I just give people the language, the tools to check in what's going on in your body. Sometimes it could actually be very connecting in a relationship to say something that feels awkward, like, hey, I noticed every time we hang out, I feel this way. Do you notice something too? And all of a sudden, even if you don't have a sense of what exactly is happening, it could actually be a really connecting moment just to label that you both are experiencing this new dissonance that doesn't feel good.
That's great. Can I ask, as we kind of come to a close, if each of you can think about what would you say is your superpower or your skill that you use to maintain your own connections with your friends and make sure that you stay, like your energy tank feels full on a regular basis?
Not sure it's a superpower, maybe aspirational, like aspirational, because we're all works in progress when it comes to this stuff. But I think remembering the power that social connection can bring to my own nourishment, right? When I've had a really terrible day at work, my instinct is not, oh, I'm gonna call a friend, or oh, let me get out to a place where I can see other people. It's like, let me plop down and watch Netflix and eat something and not talk to anyone. And knowing the research, I've had to say like, nope, this is a moment where I need to ignore what my brain is saying, like, no, just be by yourself, and push myself a little, and often it works. So it's kind of remembering the power, like remembering like what you really need to do in that moment. And honestly, for me, it's writing it down. I have it in my notes app, but kind of like when the day is shitty, honestly, and it's like you're gonna want to eat this, don't like reach out to a friend, move your body, et cetera, et cetera. But yeah, remembering in that tough moment that that's really the medicine you need, even when it doesn't feel like it.
I love that you called it medicine.
Yeah, yeah.
I feel like similarly, I would say it's both my superpower and my Achilles heel, is that I am a Sagittarius Jamaican from New York. I'm very direct. And so I have a facility, if I feel it, and now that I actually have the tools to be grounded in what I feel, I'm not afraid to state it. And I think the people who I'm most close with really appreciate that about me. And it allows me to be who I am without sort of sugarcoating that, but also being aware that it can be an Achilles heel, especially in relationships that are very close, like in my home with my wife. I'm aware that I can be too direct, and that sometimes I need to slow down and make sure that my intent matches my delivery.
That's great.
And I guess I would say the idea of friendtors for me. I think when you think about mentorship, what I started to realize is my mentors were running around doing, like they were here, and there was an accountability level that came in with friendtors where they really understood the place I was at and they wouldn't give me the out sometimes, or the just inspirational talk. They're like, no, that's not what's happening. You need to do this, this, and this, and then I'm gonna talk to you in 2 weeks, and I hope you did. It was just a different level of conversation. So I also categorize it as a be careful what you wish for. Those were the friends where I thought I was going to take a big job in banking, and they were like, what are you doing? I thought it was great. They were like, you have to do the thing only you can do, and we're going to hold you accountable to that. And so it's a very different conversation than I think I might have had with a friend. With a mentor who would have said, yeah, shoot for the stars. This was like a very much a peer, like, no, this is not what's right. We are sitting and looking at the world the same way you are, from the same position. This is actually the move. And so find friendtors to be incredibly powerful.
I like the word friendtor as well, because it brings it in closer than a mentor. But it is different than a friend, meaning that like when they give you advice, you will feel the need to follow it versus just, this is optional and I might dismiss it.
And it's informed. With a friendtor, it's a very informed person who, whether it's where you would like to go or they understand very directly, the moves you're trying to make and can really give you very informed advice.
And for me, I started with travel and with travel. I always then plan ahead the next time I'm going to go out with friends. So it's like either once a quarter, we're either doing like a game night or we've got a trip that's happening, but I always have something to look forward to on the calendar. I read this book once about happiness, and it was like, always think about the moments that you can savor. So whether it's a big thing like a weekend for brunch, or it's a concert, or it's a vacation someplace, there's always something that I'm looking forward to in the future with somebody that I know is really important to me. So here's a couple of tips and insights, and I hope that you all learn something new to reflect on to boost your happiness in your friendships today. Give our panel.